Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Building the Black Educator Pipeline Podcast. I am your host, Shayna Terrell, lifelong activist dedicated to the liberation and struggle of her people. Welcome back, everybody. Of course, week after week, I like to thank all of our supporters and all of our co-conspirators who are coming out to support and watch the show. Thanks to you. In about a couple weeks, we will be doing our 1 year anniversary of the show. So shout out to everybody who has supported us over this past year and making this show a success. And of course, as always, happy Black History Month. But you know how I feel about that. It's not just a month. Black history is 365-day vibe, okay? We are in this for a lifetime. And as always, shout out to Citizens Ed and the Center for Black Educator Development for creating this platform for us to talk to real people in the real struggle, doing the real work. So today's theme, y'all, is building the Black educator pipeline in the Black choice. The Black choice is one of the most underestimated options that we have as a people. We don't fight for our right to choose enough. But today we're going to discuss the essence of Black power and education reform. And we really have the opportunity today to celebrate somebody's lifelong legacy as a freedom fighter for freedom and liberation for African people. So I want to shout out Dr. Howard Fuller. His career includes many years of public service positions and in the education field. Dr. Fuller is Distinguished Professor of Education and founder and director of the Institute for Transformation of Learning at Marquette University in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And the mission of this institute is to support exemplary education options that transform learning for children while empowering families, particularly low-income families, to choose the best option for their children. Immediately before his appointment at Marquette University, Dr. Fuller served as the superintendent of Milwaukee Public Schools from 1991 to 1995. Dr. Fuller became nationally known for his unending support of fundamental education reform. Dr. Fuller received his BS degree, his bachelor's in sociology from Carroll College, and I know I'm going to say this wrong, y'all, but Waukesha, Wisconsin in 1962. His master's degree in sociology from Western Reserve University in Cleveland, Ohio. And in 1964, his PhD in sociological foundations of education from Marquette University, Wisconsin in 1968. He's received numerous awards and recognitions over the years, including 4 honorary doctorate degrees, and serves on various boards for a number of education and advocacy organizations. So please welcome to Building the Black Educator Pipeline, everybody, Dr. Howard Fuller. Hey, Doc.
Hey, good morning. Good morning. I told you people won't listen to that stuff, but it was
Doc,
really.
they here. They listening. We got people here. They listening. Listen. And I do that for if you don't know, now you know. Okay.
Yeah,
This is Dr. Fuller.
Yeah, well, I'm
okay?
gonna help you out. It was Waukesha, Wisconsin. I know that was a little much, but it's all good.
Like, how to pronounce this? I don't know. But thanks, Doc. We appreciate you being here. And again, this is a moment that I want to take. I know, like, you're like, no, please don't. But I want to celebrate you. While we have our activists here and our folks who fight for us and dedicated their life to freedom and liberation for African people, we got to give you your flowers while you're here. So let me be the first to say, Doc, we thank you. We love you and really appreciate you for stopping by Building the Black Educator Pipeline today.
Thank you very much. It's really an honor to be on with you this morning.
Yes.
It's morning in Milwaukee. I'm sorry.
Right. It just turned afternoon here. So you like a taste behind. So, Doc, I always start out with asking my guests to please share your educational journey with us. What inspired you to be an educator? More so for you, what inspired you to get into education?
Yeah, my pathway to education is a little bit different than many people. So, when I went to college, I was trying to choose between social work and education. So, like, I minored in sociology. I majored in sociology and minored in secondary education because I was trying to make a decision between being a social worker or being a teacher. And then ultimately, I went on to get my master's degree in social work. And so I started out as a community organizer, but my pathway to education, I guess, was when we decided to create Malcolm X Liberation University. And, from that point, a lot of different things happened in my life. And ultimately, at some point, I decided to focus on education. So when I decided to get my PhD, I wanted to combine sociology and education, therefore the sociological foundations of education. And that enabled me to continue to do community organizing, but also to focus that organizing on education, specifically on parent choice and the need for Black people, particularly low income and working class Black people, to have some voice in where their kids go to school. And then, I had the opportunity, obviously, to be the superintendent of Milwaukee Public Schools, which was a great honor, and I feel privileged to have been able to do it. They had to change the state law in order for me to be the superintendent, since I had never been a teacher or principal. And so I was the first of the so-called non-traditional superintendents, during this historical period. And so, that focus on education, with the superintendency, with some teaching that I was doing for Upward Bound and stuff like that, ultimately led me to work with a group of pastors to create what is now the Dr. Howard Fuller Collegiate Academy. So I just feel like education provided me a way to give back to my community. But I'm very, very clear that education, at least in my opinion, is not a systemic change issue. I said this in my book, that after all of these years, what I really understand is that education is a rescue mission. It's like we're trying to rescue as many kids as we can and give them an opportunity to have a better life. But that in and of itself is not a systemic change lever. It could be a part of a systemic change lever, but it isn't by itself. So that's as quick of a synopsis as I can give you.
No, I appreciate that. And it made me spark two things in me, like two questions. And I'm like, one is, so you already went in, or when you were in college, you went in, and I minored in sociology, but you already went in with the intentions of possibly working with children and working with families. Did somebody push you in that career, or was it a connection between like activism and that's how you knew the way to go about being an activist?
It was a couple of things. First of all, there were always people in my community, since I was poor. I grew up in the projects.
Me too, Doc.
Grew up in the so-called Central City, which is a euphemism for the Black community. And there were always these people who were like helping me, these adults. I mean, if you read the book, The Pact, the Lisa Fraser Page, where she collaborated with these 3 young Black men in Newark.
Yep.
2 of them became doctors, one of them became a dentist.
Yep.
And the one thing that's clear, if you actually read that book, is that even though they had a pact in high school, what really allowed them, or what really helped them, was the fact that at some point they connected to a caring, nurturing adult. And so I was privileged to have those kind of people in my life. And so I always wanted to come back, right? I had this view that, if I ever quote, made it, whatever that means, or at least got an education, that I would try to come back and give something to the community. So that really spurred me on. And when I decided social work as opposed to teaching, back then, there were 2 major forms of social work, group work and casework. But there was this new thing called community organization. And there were only 2 schools in the country at that point that offered it. Western Reserve University, where I went to, and the University of Chicago. And my thought process was that casework and group work help people manage oppression. What I wanted to do was end depression. And so I thought that by organizing people so that they could have power, that would enable them to change their conditions. So that was sort of the thought process that I went through.
Between the two. And it sounds like loving, caring adults who nurtured you are the people who pushed you in that direction. The reason why I like to highlight that and lift that up, because definitely on this show, we talk a lot about the importance and the impact of Black people and Black teachers in the lives of children and the impact they can make. And a lot of times talking about recruitment of young people to get into education, we talk about the way to do that is they need people to tell them they can be leaders. They need people to tell them that they can be great teachers. And that kind of helps to shape and push people into that direction. So shout out to the people in Dr. Fuller's lives, okay? Because Lord, look what he has become. Okay, so shout out to y'all.
Yeah, I mean, it was my mother and my grandmother that were the 2 most important people in my life. But just like you said, there was Mr. Scott from the Urban League. There was Mr. and Mrs. Game from the YMCA. There was George. I mean, there were all of these individuals, Dr. Atkinson, who at different moments in time gave me things, right? Either free medical care or help me do this or help me do that. And so when you look at the resiliency research, and it's really important given what we're going through, what it shows is that kids can make it out of even the worst of circumstances.
That's right.
If they somehow get connected to a caring and nurturing adult. It would be better if it's your family, but it could be a teacher. It could be a janitor. It could be someone at your church. It varies as to who it could be. And so as adults, we just always need to be understanding that if we reach out and help a kid, there's no telling, what that will mean to that child's life.
Facts. What impact that will make. I think a great thing too to highlight about your work, or for people to understand, and this is how we help shape kids, is what sparked your interest between like the intersectionality between education and activism, right? Because some people go into education and they teach for years. I mean, they're doing a service, which is great. Like somebody has to teach the babies, but then to kick that up a notch to say, like, I'm actually going to be an activist. I'm going to organize people around this issue or this rescue mission, as you spoke of it. What sparked that interest for those two things to happen?
Well, it's like I always tell people, and I've heard this many times in my life, Doc, I'm just a teacher. And I'm like, no. What does that even mean? Yep. Like, if you're really a teacher, there's two responsibilities that you have, it seems to me. One is to give your children, your students, everything that you have, when they're in your surroundings, in your building, or wherever the teaching and learning is taking place. But the second thing we have to recognize is that what influences a young person's capacity to learn or what impacts their capacity to learn is obviously what happens to them before they ever get to you. Yeah. And so we can't walk around here thinking that schools can by themselves change the trajectory of our children's lives. Mm-hmm. If before they get to you, they have no food, they have no clothing, they have no shelter, they're living in communities where violence is what they see every day. And so that if you're really going to like fight for these kids, it can't be just, well, I'm going to fight for them when they get in my classroom. No, I'm going to fight for them when they're in my classroom. I'm going to fight for them outside of my classroom, outside of my building, because both of those things matter. And that's what always amazes me, when you try to deal with policy, like a policy like parent choice. And you develop these relationships with people. It's a part of what Derek Bell called interest convergence theory.
Oh, yes.
Where you develop relationships with people to get something done, but you don't necessarily share their worldview. It's your interests converge. I mean, Derek Bell talked about it like during the civil rights movement. The reason why Black people were able to make progress was because at that point in time, the United States of America was trying to prove to the rest of the world that democracy was a better form of government than communism. Hard to do that with Bull Connor sicking dogs on people. So at a certain point in time, the white ruling class told Bull Connor, hey, man, you got to quit sicking dogs on people because you're messing up a larger thing. So at that moment in time, our interests converge with their interests and certain things happen. And so I truly believe in interest convergence theory. But the thing about interest convergence theory is you have to be clear on where your interests are, where the interests are of the people who you're converging with, and be clear that is probably not going to be a permanent alliance.
Yes.
You can't have people who say, well, like I support parent choice or I support charter schools, but I want anti-voting laws in place. I don't want people to have a minimum wage. I'm against healthcare policy. You got to call people out when that type of thing happens. And so
gotta hold folks accountable.
So it's really dealing with all of the things that happens to our kids, both in a school and outside of a school.
Yes. So I love that you brought up interest conversion, because I think a lot of times people don't understand when you are fighting for things and you're trying to build alliances and get buy-in, interest conversion is a huge part of how you do that. So thanks for talking about it and thanks for explaining it. But I think what I would love to hear from you, right, from your perspective, is there a point in our current society where you see interest conversion can work to advance some of the causes that Black people are currently facing?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because one of the things I try to do is I don't try to tell young people today what they ought to be doing. I just
Mm-hmm.
think that that's not my role. My role is to try to understand how you all see the world, and I can share what some of my experiences have been, and then you need to determine whether or not there's anything about what I've experienced that can help you deal with what you currently see that is happening today. Frantz Fanon wrote a book called Wretched of the Earth.
Earth.
And
Yes.
in his book, he said every generation out of relative obscurity must discover its mission and either fulfill it or betray it. So
Mm.
every generation has to figure out what is my mission, what is it that is happening today that is important, uh, and what is going to be my role. And so when I look out at the world today, I mean, it's a world that honestly I don't understand.
Mm.
And there are things that are happening that I have never seen before. And so I don't think that there's any playbook for how to deal with what it is that people are currently seeing today.
Today.
And so I really am not sure
Yeah.
exactly what people should be doing today. I mean, obviously, I'm still out here trying to work with our school and with our kids, and I have a view about how I should go about doing that. But in terms of the broader struggle that is going on now, there are certain issues in the way that people are approaching that struggle that's different. And it has to be different because the historical conditions are different.
Yeah, the times are different. It's
It's
very
hard for me to just say people ought to be doing this or that.
but
I'm not sure about that.
but this is what I love, Dr. Phil. Oh, Dr. Phil, you all humble. And what I mean by that is it's not my place. Whereas the way we've been taught about leadership, especially Black leadership, people would be looking like, well, Dr. Fuller, tell us what to do. Like that tradition of training the young to be able to take the place of leadership and to lead these fights, some of that has disappeared. Like people will literally be like, where's our Black leadership? And people looking at, well, where's Dr. Fuller? And Dr. Fuller, like, child, I'm 80. Okay, let me be in the support. Let me be in the background. Like, let me help because the conditions are different. The times are different. You are absolutely right in saying that. But I appreciate your humble response given to
Yeah.
that, right?
Yeah, people have this thing about, well, our elders. Well, yeah, but I mean, just because I'm elderly, it don't mean that I actually got anything worth hearing. But to me, the thing is the learning it's a mutual learning situation, right?
Right.
It's like I can learn. I'm constantly learning from the students at our school. I'm constantly
Mhm.
learning from people who are out doing various kinds of organizing today. So I don't believe in this whole thing about you need to sit at elderly people's feet. I mean, first of all, why would you want to do that? I mean, and I think that even if you do, the question is, while you sitting there, are they saying anything worthwhile? And then are they listening? Right? Because I think my role is to help and to listen. And so
Mhm.
there are certain things that I believe that it's important for me to work on, right? And I'm trying to focus on those things. But people who know me know that I'm also open to always trying to learn something new. I'm trying to understand why people are approaching struggle today in a certain way.
Way.
And
Yeah.
then clearly you have tools of struggle that I never had, right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
and, and so and those
Electronics, social
tools
media, internet,
change the character and the approach.
and the
But
battleground that we
yeah,
on, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
But what I do think is I do believe that there's some fundamentals of struggle, right? No matter what the age is.
Mhm.
But again, because of how I see things, I just have to appreciate that it's different. So for example, I do think that if you're focused on your brand
Yeah.
and building your brand, That's very different than being focused on struggling for a community. Because what's happening is, if your focus is on building your brand, then you're going to make decisions that will help improve your brand, whether or not that is going to help our community or not, right? So when people tell me I'm all about my brand, it ain't my place to say you shouldn't do that. But I do believe that makes a difference in terms of how you're going to approach struggle.
How you going to show up and serve people.
Yeah. I think it does make a difference if you build your whole idea of struggle on how many likes you get on Instagram.
How many followers?
And follows. But again, that may also be a lot more important than I understand it to be, because I was never like dealing with, I'm going to put my picture on Instagram and decide based on how many people like me, follow me, that's going to mean something. But in today's world, it does mean something. In today's world, it does mean something.
It does. But then my question to you, to relate that back, like maybe not likes and follows on Instagram, but when you were doing activism, were you concerned about how many people were going to show up to an organizing meeting, or how many people that you were going to be able to be in front of to get your message out to go do the next thing or advocate for the next thing, right?
I mean, that's an excellent question, because I think it's the same issue, but presented a different way. Yeah. So I have this view about, how struggle takes place, right? So the way that I see it is, and I'm gonna use the French Revolution as a base. So there's a small group of people, a small circle of people who gonna storm the Bastille. And then there's another circle of people around there who gonna hold the coats of the people who gonna storm the Bastille. They're not gonna storm the Bastille, but they're gonna hold the coats. There's another circle of people around them who gonna cheer for the coat holders. They ain't gonna hold no coats, and they damn sure ain't gonna storm the Bastille. But they're gonna cheer for the people who hold. And then every now and then people will move, into one of those circles.
In and out,
But Margaret Mead said no significant social movement has ever taken place without a small group of committed people who decide that this is going to be done, and they in it 100, right? They in it. And so I still believe that's true, right? But how you figure out which people are in which circles and what are the tools that you use to engage in struggle. So whereas for me, it may have been the most critical thing to have people show up in a room at a particular time. For you, it may be to have people show up on a Zoom or on a Facebook page or on a whatever, right? So it's a different way of organizing, but you still, I think some of the principles remain the same. If you're trying to move something to help our people, it's just that the methods that people use are different.
Yes. No, I love that. And I love the example of the French Revolution. I think that sometimes when we talk about struggle to our young people, because people think back, right, you always either quote the Civil Rights Movement or the Black Power movement, and we focus on that group of people who stormed the Bastille. We don't talk about the people who held the coats, who cheered for the coats, or the people who created the plan to storm the Bastille, but then weren't in that group who were doing it. We don't always break up organizing in that way, which is why like the civil rights gets diminished to maybe the marches or Dr. Martin Luther King, when it's like, no, it was an entire strategy that was built out. So even looking at your work, it's an entire strategy that was built out to, as you say, the rescue mission for Black children, right? We want to get them a good education to move them beyond poverty. But there are tons of people who supported and help organize that work. And I think that we don't teach organizing in that way to young people. So they are looking, who's going to be the leader, who's going to be the star, or who's going to be the voice. And not know we need a collective group of skills and a collective group of thinking in order to move, an operation forward, in order to move an idea forward. And I think that that's a very important point that you bring up, because people will focus on the folks storming the Bastille, which is looked at now. It's called like performative measures. People will look at that one action and not look at all the other actions that happen to really push that revolution, and not understand that all of that is necessary to make something work and to make it be effective. So
yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I want to follow up on something you just said, though, when you mentioned Martin Luther King. And it has to do with Black History Month, because I'm like you. I got issues. I got all kinds of issues. Right? I mean, because I understand. I mean, but if you go back to Carter G. Woodson and when they started fighting for Black History Week, right?
Yes.
I guess you would call it progress that we now have a month, right? But the reality of it is that you can't consign our history to a month. But that happens, right? And so when this month occurs, it's like people drag out all these pictures, of Black people and blah blah blah. And there's a positive aspect to that, right? It's like I posted on Twitter, I'm of two minds about Black History Month. I'm mad because people would think that our history can be relegated to a month. But I'm also going to use this opportunity to try to learn and educate as many kids as I can. So let's take Martin Luther King. One of the things that I feel deeply about is that Martin Luther King is being sanitized. And so during Black History Month, people, oh, Martin Luther King, and, I have a dream. And they make it seem like Martin Luther King was a dreamer, right?
Martin Luther King was a doer. He was a fighter.
Right, he gave it. He was killed. He was assassinated. Right.
Yes.
And actually, his most powerful speech is not the "I Have a Dream" speech. His most powerful speech is the one he gave at Riverside Church, where he came out against the war. And so what I'm saying is that even during a time like Black History Month, when the broader public writ large begins to recognize our history, we got to fight to make sure that recognition is on the real, right? Yes. And not just the part of it that they want us to hear, or the part of it that allows us to feel good about being Black. There's got to be some uncomfortableness about studying our history, because
we got to stop subscribing to the idea of what makes white people feel comfortable for us to be Black,
and some Black people who's scared to embrace the reality of our oppression,
of who we are,
and what the fight has been, right? It's the fight. And so you got to recognize there's a reason why there are people out there who don't want us to learn anything about our history.
Oh yes.
Right? And the whole debate about critical race theory, to me, is like so stupid, because there are both people on the right and the left who, number one, don't even know what critical race theory is.
Fact.
Have no idea where it came from. They confuse critical race theory with culturally responsive pedagogy. There's all kinds of like stupidity and ignorance that's going on out there. And it's our role to, as a people, those of us who have a view, is to always constantly try to put that view forward in a way that advances the struggle of our people, right? And again, that's to me where it comes back to. It's not about your brand. It's about how do you advance the struggle of a people, right? And what does that really mean? And to some extent, it obviously means understanding that history. So, for example, I read this book, Force and Freedom by Callie Jackson. And I'm mad at myself that I just read it, like about 6 months ago, right?
Because lifelong learners. We are lifelong learners.
I never knew that a Black woman financed John Brown's attack on Harper's Ferry. I never knew, because I talked to Sharif a little bit about this, right? As I was reading the book. I never knew about the battles that went on in Philadelphia. There was a community of Philadelphia where Black people like created basically a safe house for slaves. And so a slave like escaped, and they were saving them, and the white slave owner came to get them, and Black people and some white allies organized, and they actually killed this dude. This actually happened. In Philadelphia, you know what I mean? So you hear about Garrison, and every now and then you hear about Frederick Douglass, but you don't hear a lot about Black abolitionists, right? And the fact that Black abolitionists were struggling with white abolitionists, because Black abolitionists believed the only way to end slavery was going to be through violence. Therefore, the Civil War. You see what I'm saying? And so if we're gonna have laws passed that you can't teach this, and it gets reduced to, we don't want you to do this because you're trying to make my second-year-old white kid feel bad about being white. Well, anybody who's teaching history and that's what they're doing, they shouldn't be teaching history nowhere.
Yes.
So you know what I'm saying? But what this month does for people who are conscious, it gives us an opportunity to introduce certain things and then build on them, right? Because the idea is to constantly build. So when I was talking to my student yesterday, I was like, man, when we get through with this few days I'm gonna spend with you, I want to do two things. Number one, I want you to know some stuff either that you didn't know before or you're going to know it better than you ever knew it before. But more critical than that, I wanted to raise crucial questions for you. That means you got to do additional study, right? Because they always
the intellectual work. When we work with Dr. Carr, we call that the intellectual work.
Intellectual work, right?
Yes.
But the other thing is that when you understand the relationship between theory and practice, intellectual work in the absence of work, I mean, it's intellectual and work, right? And so if all you're going to do is the intellectual but no work,
you about to take me down a whole nother stream. But I'm glad that you said it. And the reason why I'm glad that you said it, because you are the example of intellect and work. You and folks like Dr. Greg Carr are true examples of folks like Sharif, are true examples of intellect and work, meaning you're educating yourself on a higher level. You're making sure you're grounding yourself in history, in facts, in research, but then you're going out and actually putting those theories into practice. But also taking on legacy. Like, you know what? Now that I know this and I understand this, I have a legacy to carry on, which is the difference between worrying about your brand and the community. I'm not trying to make my own legacy. I'm trying to carry on a legacy, a path that was laid before me. I am a participant in a long legacy history of like struggle and advancement of people. So I appreciate the fact that you're saying that, because we have a lot of folks right now who are intellects, who want to like write a book or sit up in a university. And this is no like disrespect to anybody, but to do all that and, like you said, not actually get out there and put it into use and put it into practice, what is it all for? Like, why are we doing this? To say
I think it's
this different?
Yeah, I mean, I've always believed that ideas are abstraction from reality to a certain extent, right? And there's the dialectical relationship between ideas and reality. And that ultimately, if your ideas don't get tested in reality, they become a third and fourth level of abstraction. And so you have people, for example, who are pontificating about what should happen, in a school. They ain't been nowhere near a school for 30 years. You know what I'm saying? And so
what should happen for Black children, and don't even know one. You don't even know one.
Right. So I got no issues with people who observe and all this, but at a certain point, you can't just be out there running your mouth. The issue is, what are you doing? Tell me what specific practice you're using to come up with all of these phenomenal ideas that you have, that the rest of us are supposed to like, oh my God, so-and-so said this. And so-and-so ain't been involved in a modicum of struggle. You feel what I'm saying?
Not a piece.
and so, that, I mean, I know people get a little,
listen, Doc, you gotta get to clapping about what's going on. I ain't mad, okay?
Yeah, no, I love intellectuals, but the greatest intellectuals are those who also engage in practice, because they're constantly testing their ideas against reality, right? Because at a certain point, if it's just an idea, but it never finds expression in practice, what is the value of the idea? Yes. But at the same time, those of us who engage in practice also have a responsibility to constantly be improving our intellectual understanding.
That's right.
Of the practice that we're trying to engage in.
Yes, and that's so important. And that's what we ground our young people in our programming. Like, you have to do the intellectual work. We can't just get out here and say, protest, advocate, use your voice. For what? When you have no access to prior knowledge of what a struggle looks like, what successful revolutions look like any of that. And understanding who you are and your place in the world, that only comes through research and through history of self. So definitely agree about intellectual work. One of the things you did a lot of work with parent choice. Like that was like a good base of your activist work. But I would love to hear, why do you think the freedom to choose is so important for Black families? And like, what benefits do that provide for Black children?
Yeah, like first of all, like I always get angry when people think that white people invented parent choice. And so I mean and then you get labeled, oh, you've been bamboozled. Wait. First of all, let's look at history, right? When
Mhm.
Black people came out of slavery, right? And let's be clear, Black, if you go back and read, Abraham Lincoln had to admit the North would not have won the Civil War if they had not allowed Black people to get into the army.
That's right.
The thing that changed the whole way that the Civil War was happening was when Black people were given guns. And when Black people,
Right.
and so we have to say that because there's so many people that don't understand that Black people have been critical to the fight for our liberation, right?
Which
And
was
so you
tied to
need to,
everybody else's liberation and freedom.
yeah, exactly. You need to read Black Reconstruction by W.E.B. Du Bois. Really, if you there's a
Yep.
couple of books that everybody need to read, right? One of them is that
I'm
one,
about
and
to
I
say,
finally got through it.
I'm about to pull my book
But
out.
here's the point I want to make because I
Hmm.
got so many ideas floating around in my head. So here's the
Give
point.
it to me.
But here's the point I want to make. When Black people came out of slavery, we were liberated, but we were not free. Right.
Hmm.
Yeah. All 789, whatever it is. Uh,
Oh,
and by the way, chapter 17 would be a good book to read when you try to understand the value of critical race theory. If you were just read chapter 17. Anyway, so let me get to this point.
yep.
So Black people came out of slavery and we were liberated, but we were not free. We believed that freedom was going to require an education. That the pathway to becoming a free citizen was to be educated. When we made that decision, we did not have the institutional knowledge, the resources, and so forth to develop the institutional arrangements that we needed to pursue education. So two groups of white people came at us: the industrialists and the missionaries. And each group of white people had their own idea about what kind of education we needed, right?
Yep.
But the fact is, what Black people were asking for was help, not to be controlled. And so, at a certain point in time, if you even have a little bit of knowledge of history, you know that it was the Freedmen's Bureau that was critical to development of the public education system in the South, right?
Yep.
And that what happened was when we began to develop schools, at a certain point, when the Missouri Compromise took place and all of that, and white people who had fought the Civil War and had lost were put back into power because a decision was made to in fact betray Black people.
Mm-hmm.
And the role that we had played in winning the Civil War.
Yeah.
And so then what happened was when the white people who had been in control were put back into power, the institutions that we had developed to educate ourselves, we were told you can't go to those anymore because it's going to be for white people only.
People only.
Black people then had to begin to build their own educational institutions. Why am I saying all of this? Hello? What do you think parent choice is? Any Black person who has a P for a brain knows that if Black people only have one way of doing anything in America, that is not good for us. And so to sit there and say we should have only one way to get an education is really foolhardy.
Nuts,
And,
asinine,
and
crazy.
the issue has never been parent choice. The issue is who has it and who don't.
Doesn't.
Because people with money, they've always had choice. Because if you got money and school's not working for your kids, you're going to do one of three things. You're going to move to places where they do work. You're going to put your kids in private schools, or you're going to get the most expensive tutoring on the planet, period. And if you didn't understand that, this pandemic has just brought that to bear. What do you think all of these pandemic pods and all of this was? People with money say, hey, you know what? We're gonna take care of our children.
Our own kids.
It's always those of us who are poor, who don't have the resources, who can never do what is best for our children.
That's right.
And it also, and this is the last part, it also betrays a lack of understanding of what is the difference between public education and the system that delivers it. And so anybody who says, I want to understand Black education, if you ain't read Education of Blacks in the South from 1876 to 1935,
you can't even own the book.
Because what James Anderson does in this book is to make clear that there is the idea of the public being educated, and then there are different delivery systems. And so the Philadelphia Public Schools is not public education. It is a delivery system for public education. Yes, and since it wasn't created by God, we could change it. And so the reality for Black people is we want to pursue being educated, but we want to have a variety of different mechanisms to pursue that. And so the only way to do that if you're poor is you got to have access to money. And it's government money, the same government money that other people use for all kinds of stuff. And we always apologizing for, oh, well, you know, why are we apologizing?
Don't need
people who are using the government all the time for things that they need for themselves and their communities and whatever. But whenever we step up to the plate to say we have a right, then all of this criticism comes down on our heads. Oh no, you trying to destroy public institutions. You trying to do this. You trying to do that. And I'm like, bruh.
And you're right, and stay in that fight, because at the end of the day, we're like, you're trying to destroy public institution. But if I'm poor and I'm Black, what service has a public institution provided for me or my kids or my family? So I mean, even if I am trying to destroy it, you're damn right. You're damn right.
I'm trying if it hasn't been meeting our needs,
then why
we need to do something different
about it?
Yes. What did Einstein say? Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. You feel me?
I do.
And so as a people who are look, ever since they brought us here, and if you read the middle, first of all, like everybody should read Walter Rodney's book, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, right? Because
I don't have that one over here. I don't have that one.
It's the clearest explanation for what this is all about. And you should also sometimes read a book like the Apologists for Slavery wrote, because I collected books on slavery. And it was, I think this guy's name was Burgess. And he made a statement that, and I think he was the head of the Columbia School of political science. Said that Black people come from a race of people who have never contributed anything to the development of human civilization. But anyway,
he wrote that somewhere.
Oh yeah.
Oh, insane. Okay.
It's also quoted in the Plessy decision. But anyway, so but there were these apologists for slavery who said that Black people, God created Black people to be Black because being Black allowed you to be in the sun, for longer periods of time. This is all in books. I mean, I'm not making all this up, right? But the point I'm trying to make is that from the moment that the decision was made to rip us off from Africa and bring us here, we engaged in struggle. That struggle, sometimes if you read books like The Middle Passage, and you understand that Black people threw their babies overboard and people committed suicide rather than to be enslaved.
Yes.
You move away this idea that Black people went humbly and mildly into oppression, that we never resisted. So if you tell somebody, have you ever heard of Nat Turner? Have you ever heard of Denmark Vesey? Have you ever heard of Gabriel Prosser? Like, okay, did you know that there were 4 Black men with John Brown? Did you know that one of them survived and wrote a book on his experiences, right? So what I'm trying to do here is to say that my study of history tells me that every time you can pursue something that gives you more power, that gives you some ability to control some aspect of your life, you should pursue that. And for people to sit and say, no, we should just only be in the Philadelphia public school system. You ought to read One Best System by Tyat, which is the best explanation of, to me, the education system in this country and the pursuit of the one best system. And it tells you all of the times when it's in white people's interest that they abandon the one best system. They don't believe in it. They only believe in it to the extent that it works for them. We're the ones who's sitting there believing in an idea that makes no sense when you really get down to it. But, I got brothers and sisters who, have a different view of the world, and hey, but
you can have a different view of the world, Dr. Fuller, all you want. But the one thing you're pointing out is when we are not with a system is not in service to us, why continue to use that system? Which feeds right into, yes, freedom of choice. Just because you poor and you Black does not mean that you are not deserving of a choice. And of course, like living in a capitalistic society, money is what breeds choices. A lot of times it illuminates itself in ways of racism because we know how money is filtered in this country. But at the end of the day, if you don't have money, you're going to struggle to have choices. And that doesn't mean that poor Black
people.
And
the opposite is true. The opposite is true. If you got money, it gives you the power to pursue freedom, right? Freedom. I mean, because you can be free, but you broke. And so at a certain point, the question is, how much freedom can you exercise and you ain't got nothing? You know what I mean?
This is why I struggle. And this is, Doc, you be having me on another. This is why I struggle when I argue with people about capitalism, right? You can't talk about wanting freedom and all this other stuff and then be in support of capitalism, a system which truly keeps people poor and is designed to keep people poor on purpose. And in this country, it's designed to keep Black people poor. So if you're Black and you support capitalism, understand we have to exist within the system. But your support of that system or like cheering that on, understand that there is a permanent underclass of you who are Black people who are never going to have the freedom of choice because it's tied to money. We're always going to be fighting and be in this mode of activism due to the monetary system in which we exist under. So I appreciate that you bring up those 2 points. You can be free and broke. Now what? What's next?
The other thing I really want to argue for, or at least make a point, is like one of the things I try to do with my book. Right? People ask me, why'd you write this book? Well, I wrote the book because, number one, there's now about 28 or 29 or 30 books out there that talk about me in one form or another, either using my African name, or my slave name, whichever one they use. And so I was like, if all these people talk about me, I better tell my own story while I'm still alive.
Yes,
So I get my own story. But and another thing, it gave me a way to honor my mother and my grandmother, right? But another reason I wrote it is because I want anybody who engages in struggle to understand that if you decide to fight for social justice for our people for 5 minutes, you're going to be involved in contradictions. And the question is, can you live with these contradictions? And will you just tell the truth about the contradictions, right? Don't be acting like ain't no contract. So people tell me all the time, oh, you taking money from that person. I don't run from that. My argument is, yeah, you're right. And my problem is I don't get enough money. Now, do I understand that taking this money, it creates contradictions? Yeah. But I also understand the people who have a different view than I have, they're getting money from somebody. Everybody getting money from somebody. The question is, what do you do with the money? How do you use the money? What is it that you're trying to do with the money?
We know what you're doing, Doc. You building schools and you liberating other African
exactly,
people. You know what I'm saying? We know
and one of the things I learned a long time ago is you can't get money from people who don't got no money, right? And our people need money. Our people need help. And so some of us who have the opportunity got to go get that help. Yes. And I understand that even as you're doing it, you're going to be criticized. But if you're going to fight out here, you got to be willing to take criticism. And some of the criticisms are valid. You know what I'm saying? And I ain't mad at you for criticizing me, but it ain't going to stop me from doing what it is that I feel like I got to do. You got a right to say whatever you want. Because if you get money to write a book to criticize me, God bless you, brother, right on. Because it ain't going to change nothing I'm going to do. Because I don't care. You know, because the only thing I care about is, can I help my people? Mm-hmm. You know, because at our school, these kids, they're not trying to hear all my theoretical arguments. They want to know, is the lights going to be on? Are we going to have school lunch? The teacher want to know, are they going to get paid? There's certain things that people want that require resources. Yes. And you got to figure out, how do I get these resources for my people? Mm-hmm. And all I'm saying to you is that I'm prepared to take all of the criticism. And I'm not even saying that the criticism is not valid. Mm-hmm. I'm just saying the way I understand interest convergence theory is what it is that I have to do for my people. And I'm not saying that every decision I've made as I've struggled over all these years has been right. But the easiest thing to do is to don't do nothing, and therefore you won't be criticized, right? Because the moment you get out to do anything for our people, there's a group of people who are going to be at you. And they're going to be at you because they have a different view.
Yes.
And for some of them to be at you is their way to make a living.
Yes.
You feeling me?
Yes.
And they're not going to give up that living. You got people who making money criticizing other Black people's work. But if you were to roll back up in them and say, hey, you know, bro, sister, like, are you willing to give up this? No, I ain't giving up this gig because it allows me to do what? It allows me to like send my children to private schools.
I got a family to feed myself.
It allows me to live in a certain community away from the rest of y'all. There's a whole list of things
Doc,
that
you
it allows me to do.
Absolutely right. Yes.
So all I'm saying is those of us who decide to engage in struggle, and I'm gonna say this, I tell my kids all the time that I want you to do well and do good. Because what I'm saying to them is, I don't want you to live a life of poverty. Mm-hmm. I want you to be able to get some of the things that you want in your life. But what I also want you to do is to give back. I also want you to like believe that to those of us who much is given, much is required. To those of us who've been able to get to a certain point in our life, we have a deep responsibility to all of our people who are suffering. And I deeply believe that. You know, and while education is one way, we got brothers and sisters out there who are fighting for housing. We got, you know, people who are fighting to change the criminal justice system. We got people who are out there fighting for a minimum wage. We got people who are out there fighting to make sure that people can get health care. To me, all of those struggles are valuable. And I love and respect those brothers and sisters who take up those issues, even some who, because of the way they take it up, they fire back at me. I ain't mad at them. I'm not. As long as your goal is advancing the interests of our people, as long as your goal is to try to make sure that people who are hungry get fed, that
Mhm.
people who have no houses get a house, that
Yes.
people who have no health care get health care, that people who are not making a living wage get a living wage.
Mhm.
You feeling what I'm saying? And
Yes.
so I think that as you fight and as you continue, because I tell people like you, all I want is another 25 years. You feel me?
Yes.
Because and as long as you're willing to put in those 25 years and you are honestly engaging in trying to make a difference for our people,
People.
then I say God bless you. I mean, that's
No,
all.
Doc, you lift up some very interesting points, and I think what you're saying should resonate with folks who are, again, listen, leaders in the struggle. We are living contradictions, and there's going to be criticism that comes at you, and you just have to know that when you're in this line of work, it's going to happen. But also understanding the systems in which we operate under. So peeling back some of that judgment, how you said, like, if you get money to write a book about me, write on brother, because I understand the conditions in which we exist under, and what you got to do to also feed your family, so that you could have a freedom of choice, and how all of that, rolls into one. Doc, we are like coming up on time, and it's like so many, it's like 1,000 things that I wanted to talk to you about today that we just ain't gonna get to. We just not. But one thing, it's like two more things that I definitely want to hit before we leave off here. One is, I think, again, like you saying, the way that you are getting money or choosing to get money, but to me, it's an honor with the things that you choose to do with that. And one of the things, like you said, starting Malcolm X University. Would you consider starting another liberation school again?
Well, I'm just
Or supporting the
concentrating.
creation of it?
Yeah, no, I'm just concentrating on the Dr. Howard Fuller Collegiate Academy. And
Academy.
one of the things you said, I mean, and I appreciate, but I don't believe in stuff like legacy and all that. But I had to bow down and say,
Doc, you got a
okay,
legacy. You
yeah,
got
yeah.
love.
But anyway, so we right now we're serving 325 children, and we're 9 through 12. And we're actually trying to do something that's never been done in Milwaukee, and that is a charter school that is controlled by Black people, meaning that the board is majority Black.
Black.
And
Okay.
as long as
That's
my
dope.
name's on it, it better be that way. Because
That's what it's gonna be.
I told them when I'm gone, if they change that, I'm coming back to haunt all of them. But what we're trying to do is to build a brand new building for our children, because it's needed. It's never been done in the city of Milwaukee. We're an independent Black school that's not connected to a church or some other organization has been able to do that.
Doc,
And the
that's
reason why, because I want our kids to feel better every day they walk into the building, right? Not that the building is the end all, because you have a beautiful building, but if ain't nothing happening in the building, so you want to have both. So my point is that's what I'm focused on. It's trying to make sure that the Dr. Howard Fuller Collegiate Academy is the best that it can possibly be for our children. So
yes, Doc, that's dope. And we have a segment on here called Think a Black Teacher. So before we get out of here, I definitely want you to be able to have the opportunity to thank a Black teacher or some teachers. So here we go right now. Thank a Black teacher.
all Black teachers who are out there engaged today, I really do. I mean, teaching. People say it's a noble profession. It is a noble profession, but it's a necessary profession. And for those of you who've taken up this responsibility, I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. And particularly to be doing that work in the world that we're confronting today, there's never been anything like this. And so what you all are writing the book, there is no book that's been written before you. So you Black educators today, you're writing that book. And I just want to thank you for that.
Oh, thanks, Doc. Appreciate it. So, Doc, I also read somewhere that you used to DJ back in the day,
Yeah.
doing your thing out here. So,
Yeah.
what made me think about, like, Doc, are you listening to any of the current music
Yeah, I
out
do.
here?
I do.
Oh,
I
yes.
do.
Tell me some
Yeah.
artists you into right now.
Well, although I listen to it, some of it I don't understand. Okay, but like I like LMA. You feel what I'm saying? Like
Yes.
her, or I like her. My man, what's the dude that put out Permission?
Um,
You know what I'm talking about, right?
I
Like
do.
it's on my playlist.
Okay.
Like so, I like them. I mean, some of Drake's stuff. I mean, but some of it just all sounds the same to me, honestly.
Yes.
And so I be looking for something that like
That's
is
different. That really
different.
catch your ear.
You see what
Okay.
I'm saying? Like it like catches me like in like a different way.
Okay.
So,
Were
but
you
when
into
I
like
was,
rap, or were you like R&B guy?
I like all of it.
Okay,
I
all
like
of
all of
it.
it. Yeah, like when I was superintendent, I actually DJ'd a dance for 8th graders.
Yo, Doc, that's
And
fire. That's
and
fire.
it was when Chronic had first come out, and I was
By
out there trying to
Dre.
find I was out there trying to find the clean version.
Before to play for the kids, you was dropping Chronic at the dance.
Yes.
That's so lit. Like, that is so lit. Definitely. I was like, let me see if Doc is into some of the currents, y'all. Y'all better get with it, okay?
Yeah. I mean, I do, but like I said, some of it I don't really get
Yes.
necessarily.
And I can understand that.
But like Kendrick Lamar, I mean, when he said, we're gonna be all right. I mean, that's a powerful thing, right?
Yes.
You see what I'm saying? If you could like really like
Yes.
get what he's saying, it's like there's power
We're in it.
in that.
Yep.
So yeah.
You're similar to me, Doc. You like music that can hit your soul and like really speak to your soul and that you can connect with.
And then I also like music that gets you in trouble. You feel me?
Well, again, we live out here again, living contradictions, right? I'm an intellect. I'm smart. I'm out here being an activist, but got a little ratchet to me. Doc, you from Convergence. You got a little that in you. You know what I'm saying?
There's some kind of it's Ro James, but there's some kind of playlist you put together.
Yeah, I got you.
It has a certain purpose
for your different moves. You might pull out when you about to go to war. You might let me put on this Chronic record one time to get hype. I feel you, Doc. I'm with you. That is so dope. And then one of the viewers asked a while back, and I don't want to leave without asking you this. She said, can you please ask Dr. Fuller some of the things that he does for joy? So we all know as Black revolutionaries, one of the things that we don't do is really like sustain our souls and take care of ourselves. So can you just tell what are some of the things that you do to have Black joy in your life?
Honestly, I don't do a lot. I mean, I actually get joy out of being at our school and seeing the light come on, for our kids. I mean, I am a sports fanatic, right? So, I mean, so Giannis, Giannis is like the man. I'm gonna watch the Super Bowl. I do all that kind of stuff, but
got you.
That's pretty much it.
Get into sports and being around kids, that brings me joy too.
Oh yeah. I mean, when you see, like you see all that potential, right? And when you can see it realized, there's nothing better than that. I mean, and my tagline in my email is from Mary McLeod Bethune, right? That the drums of Africa will never let my soul rest as long as there's a single boy or girl, Black boy or girl who's not reached his or her worth.
Yes. Oh, excellent. What a great note to end on. So, Doc, we want to thank you for stopping by the Black Educator Pipeline. You are amazing. Amazing. We already asked somebody was already like, we need another hour, which really means we need to invite Dr. Fuller back. So we'll definitely be doing that. But I thank everybody for coming back to watch us every Thursday at 12. We'll be here next week. Same place, same time. Peace, y'all. Thank you.